Good afternoon. This is the December 9th, 2019 Salina City Commission meeting. Ask the city clerk if proper notice has been sent to satisfy Kansas Open Meeting Act requirements.
Yes.
Thank you. In that case, call the meeting to order and ask for roll call.
Mayor Davis.
Here.
Commissioner Hay.
Here.
Commissioner Hodges.
Here.
Commissioner Hoppick.
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
Here.
Okay, if you're able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have no awards and proclamations today, so we can move straight into Citizens Forum. It's an opportunity to come to the podium to discuss any issue that is not on the agenda, and we ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes. Please give your name to the clerk.
Deborah Corrales. Can I bring these to you guys?
Yes. All right.
I'm going to try and show you today why breed-specific legislation doesn't work. I'd really like you to pay attention to dog number 1 and dog number 9 and notice how similar they both look. They're both white. Their heads are shaped the same. One ear's black, one ear's white. Both ears are black. Which one's the Staffordshire?
I'd rather you present to us, rather than make it a two-way.
My point is you can't tell the difference, and one is and one isn't by DNA. And the problem is both dogs would be taken and considered American Staffordshire in Salina because it's based on looks. Number 9 is your pit bull. Number 1 is significant boxer with bulldog. Now take a look at number 7. There's another American Staffordshire. It looks like an Australian cattle dog, but it's got some, which is 49% up to. Breed-specific legislation is unfair not only to the dogs that are the breeds that you're after, but it's definitely unfair to the ones that you're not. And in this town, once they call your dog a pit bull, even though your paperwork from 10 years ago said it was a boxer mix, you lose your dog. They kill it sometimes. And the little puppies in front of you were born at my house at the exact same time by the same mother and look totally different. He's got his mother's coat, but not her coloring. And she's got fuzzy hair, which isn't her mother, but looks exactly like her mom. Breed-specific legislation doesn't work when you look at a dog because you can mix breeds and they're going to look totally different than their parents. Proof. Thank you.
My name is Tyler Sartain. I live at 233 North Kansas Avenue here in Salina. I've been a resident for the past 18 years, and over the years I've seen many changes to our city, some good, some bad. And today I'm speaking to you as a resident that's been waiting for a change to our city's ordinance on the pit bull ban. We the people have been requesting this change for quite some time now, and I ask you commissioners to do something for the people and repeal this ban. I understand some of you may not wish to make this decision based on the fear that if this ban is repealed and an accident happens, the blame falls upon you. I can assure you that that blame would not be yours, but the owner of the dog. Just like any other animal accident that happens in this town, it's on their owners. There's a famous quote used by many psychologists stating that all behavior makes sense in context. Pit bulls aren't evil, and they don't deserve to be treated like they are. They learn what's taught to them by humans just like any other breed of dog. I grew up around dogs. I've interacted with many dogs, even pit bulls. One pit bull in particular was rescued. She was in a dog fighting ring used as a bait dog. She was rescued, rehabilitated, and now is living a happy, healthy life. I understand that not everybody is thrilled about repealing this ordinance because of the fear and stigma that surrounds these breeds. But if you look at the scientific studies on the pit bull, you can find that they aren't a bad breed. It's all about how they're raised and cared for. Fear and misinformation have controlled the minds of people, causing breed-specific legislations all over the country, causing thousands of innocent dogs to be put down just because of their breed. Now, I can think of a few instances where legislations were put upon humans just based upon their skin color, religious beliefs, or personal identities, and we all know how that turned out. Breed-specific legislation is a waste of time, energy, and the life of a beautiful dog, and not to mention taxpayer dollars. Think about it this way. If this ban is repealed, how many more families will look at Salina differently? They could see that this is a place that welcomes their furry friends. It would be inviting and hopefully encouraging to people to come live here without the fear of losing their dog. I'll close with this. Fear has no place here. And if this governing body is uneasy with making a decision, I demand that this decision be put to a public vote on the next election. Even our Animal Advisory Board has recommended this to the Commission to repeal the ban, and that was over a year ago. I urge you to take action today and repeal this ban. It's long overdue, and the people are waiting, and our patience is wearing thin. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kim Cunningham. I reside at 683 Georgetown Road. To the mayor, to our commissioners, to the city manager, and to the citizens of Salina. I would like to share some of my thoughts concerning our current breed-specific legislation and the topic of repealing it. As a current member of our local animal advisory group, I was one of those members left that recommended the ordinance be repealed in our city over a year ago. I have been waiting and watching the commissioners' meetings via TV as I, like so many other of our citizens, are unable to make these 4 p.m. meetings because of work commitments. After last week's meeting, when Mr. Hoppick had made the statement he really didn't know where to start, I felt I needed to publicly make a few statements. In the last few weeks, Deborah Corrales has shared with you multiple information, maybe some pictures that aren't good to see, but she's shared multiple information articles along with the DVD Beyond the Myth. I'm not going to put anybody on the spot by asking if you've taken the time to read any of those short information or if you've even read and looked at the DVD on Beyond the Myth. Most of the stuff that she presented were legal organizations, animal advocacy organizations, and professional animal welfare organizations. The other thing that made me decide to come this week was because of the book that was suggested. Hopefully, I'm understanding that you guys received this book. I can tell you as an animal lover, as a dog lover, it was very upsetting. If I had not known that you were asked to read the whole thing, I probably would have put it down, and I probably wouldn't have given this any other thought at all. This is not an unbiased book by any means. It is very biased toward the implementation of BSL. The other thing I want to note is that you guys don't have time to do all of this, but I'd just like to show you there are many, many books, not just this one. out there that you can read to get all points across. I think the one thing that upset me about this book was I was unable to find it. It is not in our local library. It is not available in any library in the USA. That information was researched by Deborah Corrales with our local librarians. The reason it was not available in our local library is because it was individually published. It was not done by a public publisher. And so it's not in our library, and it was not able to be found. This book was called The Nanny Dogs by J. Thomas Beasley, who is an attorney. And like I said, it's only available through Amazon. I actually downloaded it because I had to order the hard copy and download it on my Kindle to read it. I just want you to understand where this book is coming from and who is recommending it to you. I am in no means standing here before you and presenting myself as a dog professional, because I'm not. I'm not. But I have tried diligently over the last 4 years to be an informed pit bull advocate. The first book I ever read was The Lost Dogs, which looks like this, which you can tell I've read multiple times. This is a book that talks about the Michael Vick 51 dogs that were rescued when they broke up his fighting ring. I've also read the book, there's now a new one that at the 10-year anniversary that this one was written. It's called The Found Dogs. Both of these books were written by the same author. And what it does is the second book follows up on these dogs that were taken and rehabilitated, where they are, what they were put in homes, were they not put in homes, and where they're living, and most of them, unfortunately, are deceased by now. But like I said, both of these were written by the same author. I did also want to note that most of the books that we have in our library here in Salina are pro pit bulls. We also have 3 books available to our kiddos in the kiddo section of these types of dogs. Just want you to know that, you know, there's lots of information. Now, most of you aren't going to have time to read all these books. And I understand that. But short little articles, you can read. Social media, you can read. I have read, I have rescued, I have transported, I have met families that have these dogs, and I have sat in their homes and interacted with these dogs. I see no difference in these dogs. I've walked into homes that have these dogs that don't even know me from Adam. And I can tell you, my little 16-pounder will try to attack you before these big dogs will. My main thing is I want this put on the agenda. I don't want it discussed like this. I want it as an agenda item. This is what I even pushed for when we were in the animal control. This is a very controversial subject to our community, to our families, to the safety of our communities and everything else. None of us want an unsafe community. But I'm tired of these dogs and these families, responsible dog owners, having their dogs taken away, can't even be adopted in the state of Kansas, never to be seen again, and yes, as has been stated, some of them have been put down.
I'm going to ask you to wrap up in 1 minute.
Yes, yes. I don't think it's fair to ask people to take a day off of work and drive long distances to be given only 5 minutes to talk about such a controversial issue. And that's why I want this put on the agenda so we can have professional people come and talk to you, that you can ask your questions of concern and ask, you know, the people that are involved in it. I do have a very short handout that is actually a follow-up to the book that the city has asked you to read. I'd like to pass that out to you. I'm actually going to ask Debbie to, and then in closing, I just want to make this statement. Thank you, Debbie. I'm a little messy, aren't I? This article was written actually by, I think the bark. I can't remember. I think I wrote it on one of the pieces of paper. But anyway, in closing, because I know I'm hitting my 5 minutes, and I appreciate your letting me go a little bit farther. In fact, I handed someone my paper that has the highlight of it. Okay, I think it's the next to very last page. And it's so before you buy into the media and the hype, before you let mistreated and misunderstood animals who have been unfortunately hurt another due to lack of training or socialization, or worse, due to abuse, screw your view. Please ask yourself, do I know what I'm talking about? Have I actually ever met a pit bull dog? Have I given them a chance, or am I just believing what the media wants me to do? Pit bulls are not a statistic. They are not monsters. They aren't born into the world wanting to kill. They are an unfortunate victim of a lot of difficult circumstances. They will forgive you. They forgive those that hurt them. They forgive you for being afraid, and they will forgive you for not understanding. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody who wants to read a book, just notify me. I'll give you a good one, short one, too.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. James Nolan. I live at 317 South 12th Street here in Salina, and I currently hold a PhD in neuroscience and animal behavior from the University of Nevada, and I'm also currently serving as department chair of the Department of Psychology at Bethany College in Lindsborg. And I'm here just to briefly mention that I do not own a pit bull, or is it in my agenda to have one at the current time. But I do have about 25 years of experience in animal behavior and brain science right now. And I'm here for no other reason other than I've seen this could be a topic. And I just want to offer kind of myself as a reference point if anybody should ever like to hear more about kind of the science end of this. And I would be happy to meet with anyone individually or as a group to discuss kind of the science end of this. I'm afraid the science end of this would go well beyond the less than 5 minutes that I would have left at this point. But there is a history of what led to these breed-specific bans. These breed-specific bans have happened with other breeds as well in the past. Pit bulls are not the first, probably won't be the last. So I think it's important to kind of understand the history of where these came from, what led to these decisions, and also what the science end of this is. And I'm freely prepared to answer any questions, should the need be, about such things as BPI or bite pressure index or specific traits of breeds and breeding qualities and such. So with that, again, James Nolan, I'll be available for any questions anytime.
So that you don't have your phone number all over the media, if you could leave your contact information with the city manager,
Sure.
then we can, okay. Although we do know where you work, though. Okay. All right, thank you for coming.
Norman Mantle, Salina, this young man said, bring this issue up. Why are you letting it drag out so long? You people always like to drag your feet. Get something done. We elect you to serve the people. And they've made this request. Why are you refusing to do it?
I'll
Scared
take
of
that
it?
one. I'll take that
Well,
one.
actually,
It's,
okay,
it's not
I'll
a
let-
refusal on the city commission's part by any means. It's been an issue that staff's been slow to work through. We went over the staff report this weekend. We're making final preparations for it to be on next Monday's agenda.
So-
That's at the city commission's discretion in light of the comments about opportunity for public input and timing and those type of things. If you want to give alternate direction, you're certainly welcome to do so, but our intention is to provide you with the staff report with the packet that goes out this Thursday for consideration next Monday.
So we are going forward.
That's the intention, with a discussion about the topic.
And then how long will that be postponed?
Well, at that point, it's for the city commission to determine how they'd like to
The
proceed.
commissioners.
We didn't want to have I don't know what else is on our agenda for next Monday, but we'll reserve ample time for discussion.
But the other pressing item that's taken quite a while for staff to bring to you is Baseball Enterprises and the public-private partnership for that project. So our intention is for that to be on your agenda as well.
So we may be serving dinner here next Monday.
You might want to eat a large lunch. How's that?
Right. Anyone else to come for Citizens Forum?
May I ask a question?
If it's not something you necessarily expect an answer to right away. Yeah.
I wanted to clarify. So what you're asking them is if they want to put it on the agenda.
No, well, I'm sorry, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt. Sorry, go
No,
ahead.
that's okay. So it will be on the agenda?
Yes, the intention is for it to be on the agenda. What I was noting was your request for a different approach, and if the city commission wished to do something different than have it on their regular agenda next Monday, they would need to provide alternate direction.
So would that be an appropriate time to have people from out of town
Certainly.
drive in and be able to speak with the commissioners?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Just so I'm understanding the process correctly, too, I'm assuming we'll have the discussion item on Monday, and then depending on the consensus among the city commissioners, we will give staff direction to either not advance breed-specific legislation revocation, or we would. Am I understanding that correctly?
Those are definitely two of the choices. You could ask for further information, further public input, but those are kind of the most likely alternatives.
Okay, and so then at that point, would we be establishing a date that we could consider that? Would staff be prepared to present that as an action item? How soon?
One direction would require further action, one wouldn't. So
Right.
depending on what your direction is, and if it is repeal of the breed-specific legislation, that's a pretty straightforward action item. It doesn't take a lot of drafting to repeal. So I think we could bring that forward quickly. If we end up with some alternate that you'd like modifications, then it kind of depends on what, the details of those modifications might be. If you retain it as is, no further action needed. If it's a full recommendation for repeal, I think we can probably turn that by the January 6th meeting. If it's something in between, that, just depending on what direction you provide, may require additional time to draft.
And I do want to thank staff for providing each of us with a copy of this book, and I'm probably halfway through, and I would like to note that in terms of like an unbiased account, I was expecting, it's interesting reading, but it's not an unbiased account.
Despite the title. And then,
Yeah, it's not a critical and objective analysis of the facts and myths concerning pit bulls.
and I wouldn't argue that point. What I would say is I think it is at least an inventory of kind of the talking points that frequently come up. And then we're counting on you as commissioners to exercise judgment and discretion. So having reviewed the staff report and worked on it, we're starting with what do we have in place today, and what was what led up to the pit bull ban or the breed-specific legislation? What was the rationale? What are the court cases, or what's the legality behind it? And then trying to inventory kind of the talking points that occur on this topic, so that you have some basic information to try to make what is ultimately kind of a more of a judgment call than some type of definitive right and wrong answer.
Thank you. We will move now to the consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of December 2nd, 2019. Item 6.2, adopt resolution number 19-7775, describing the corporate limits of the city of Salina. And item 6.3, adopt resolution number 19-7779, authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with Union Pacific Railroad Company for a pipeline crossing and encroachment of railroad property at the intersection of Mulberry and 4th Street.
Is there any item that the commissioner would like removed from the consent agenda? Hearing none, entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Mayor Davis, I move we approve the consent agenda items 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3.
Second.
Okay, been moved and seconded, sorry, to approve the consent agenda. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Carries 5-0. Administration.
Item 7.1, resolution number 19-7768, adopting the 2020 to 2024 capital improvement program budget.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. During the annual budget process, departments request purchases and projects that exceed the cost that can be managed within their budget or ultimately going to be needing to be debt financed. We call these CIP and sub-CIP, or capital improvement program, and those sub-CIP items. These items were reviewed with City Commission at study sessions on June 7th and October 28th. There's two categories. The sub-CIP is categorized by items that are over $20,000 but are typically funded through cash. There are 5 categories within there. There's capital planning, buildings and facilities, streets, vehicles and equipment, and system enhancements. Sources for funding of these types of projects are out of cash and are typically from the general fund, the sales tax capital fund, the gas tax fund, and the other enterprise funds. A summary of these projects has been provided to you in the packet. I won't go over each one of them in detail. Purchases and projects of greater value, longer length, and may ultimately be debt financed or organized in the capital improvement program by year for the next 5 years and by source of funding. The source of funding for these projects could be property tax, sales tax, enterprise funds, or cash. While we provide a 5-year outlook, we are only approving the 2020 projects at this time for staff to proceed with. For the 2020 recommended projects of purchases, we have a few: the Ohio Street Trail, which is part of the river renewal, the purchase of Canopolis Lake, or water from the lake, also for the river project, the first phase of the construction of the river renewal project. Those 3 funds are all anticipated to be debt financed out of sales tax. We have the northbound 9th Street Bridge construction, purchase of equipped fire apparatus, the TPEC floor, the basketball floors at TPEC, self-contained breathing apparatus, and the emergency radio system project. Those projects would all be debt financed and paid through property tax. As mentioned before, the fiscal note for these projects comes from either cash from specific funds or are debt financed and are supported by various sources. The options for the 2020 CIP and sub-CIP are for you to approve them as recommended, to amend them as you see fit, postpone the decision on these items and give us direction as far as more information that you'd like, or to deny this, which would put these purchases in progress and on hold, and they would have to be submitted in next year's budget. I'm open for any questions. If you have anything about a specific project or about the process in itself, I'd be glad to answer that.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a question for you, Ms. Back, or if it's a question for staff, but the emergency radio system, the $3.5 million that we're looking at financing for 2020, is that specifically just our specific equipment that we need in order to interface with the county?
Yeah, at the moment, that's our best estimate of our share of the broader project, in light of kind of the conversation that's gone on about the city being responsible for dispatching and equipment that's specific to us, the county taking responsibility for the broader aspects of antennas and communication, and then different fire district, sheriff's department funding their radio equipment. That project, the bids have been finalized, and I believe the project's out to bid as we speak. So as the bids come in, we'll know more about the accuracy of that budgeted number.
And then on the TPEC basketball floors, I noticed that we're going to be financing that for 15 years, and I was just curious as to what the lifespan of a basketball floor is.
I asked the same question and was assured that, well, the one that we have, I think, may be original to the building, so it certainly exceeded 15 years, and I was assured that it would meet or exceed the 15-year financing.
Yeah, total cost of that floor is 100,000, 110,000?
110.
So that's going to be 40,000 in interest over the 15 years. Only bad thing about sitting up here is you see only 6 numbers with 1 comma. It doesn't seem as much money as it used to be. Is that something that might be, well, would be
finance?
cheaper just to write a check and be done with it?
We looked at possibly paying those out of cash, out of like the sales tax purchases, but the problem with that is it takes up such a huge portion of that budget that then you take away a lot of other things that need to be financed through vehicles and equipment or building and facility improvements or something like that. There's just not a lot of money set aside for that type of repair, and to do that one project out of that eliminates a lot of other projects. So if the opportunity is there, we could certainly still do that.
That's a great question. So our total interest cost would be 50,000?
That's right.
Would be, or 40,000, which would be,
Yeah, 40.
Yeah.
4/11 is, it's almost 20% of, or 30, it's almost 40% of the cost. And that's not rolled into the total operating budget for Parks and Recs?
No.
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 That is
Would that
within
have been
Bicentennial
an
fund
option?
is
I'm sorry, no,
funded
I'm sorry,
separately.
I'm getting 2 places mixed up, right?
Yeah.
But so for
Right.
Tony's Pizza, it's not,
That item is currently not part of the park master plan priorities or an intended expense from the sales tax funds dedicated to parks. If I was going to offer up, if asked to find an alternative, that's about the only one I know of, is to take it out of the annual parks allocation.
unless someone wants a floor named after them.
Well, there's always that possibility, but, and Spectre is actively marketing naming rights at the facility, but
Commissioners, hidden in all the background information, it does say the existing floor was purchased in 2000.
It's 20 years old.
I didn't know if you were finished, Commissioner Hodges,
Oh.
that question just popped out when you,
No, and I appreciate being able to ask the follow-up. I had some just questions and confirmations to make in further years down the road, and I guess some questions about why certain things are postponed that kind of look like public safety issues to me. On page 14, there's a fire station alerting system. And there's a note that the system, our present system, has become unreliable, undependable, outdated, and does not provide department with capabilities to meet its standard of cover metrics. And so that was kind of a red flag for me. There were also there was a Dry Creek Bank stabilization, Magnolia Road Bridge Bank revetment, because there's a hole being washed underneath the bridge, and like the Smoky Hill Museum HVAC, which I imagine is pretty important for the preservation of its collection. So I guess when I was looking through here, there were just some things that was like, is there any way to move those up in the order? Because these are all like 2024 and beyond, or haven't had, they're projects for further review that haven't had a funding source determined yet.
As we go through the process, we do reach out to departments to kind of help us prioritize the needs of these projects. And so every year, I know especially Public Works, they put projects on knowing that they're going to need them in the future so that they can kind of keep them rolling. What we can do is do a little bit better job in making sure that we're reaching out to those departments and saying, what is the real critical point that this needs to be done so that we can get those put on a little bit sooner rather than later? Because typically, we don't put anything on after 2020 or 2021, the first couple of years. As you'll notice, the rest of it is just typical things that we do every year, whereas those projects aren't jumping up the list as we would like. But it is prioritized.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hodge? All right. Thank you. Any questions, comments from the public? All right, bring it back to the commission for action.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve Resolution 19-7768, adopting the 2024 Capital Improvement Program budget.
Second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the 2020 to 24 capital improvement program budget. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. And next is 7.2, and while the chief is walking up here, just wanted to thank the Parks and Recs Department for putting on a good Christmas party yesterday. If you can see the face of the little boy who won the bicycle that just made the whole day worth it. It was fun. And I don't know who that lady was in the green jacket standing next to me. But, okay. But she was quite fashionable, right? Okay.
Item 7.2, authorize the addition of a power load cot system in the 2019 remount ambulance for the fire department.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Commissioners, good afternoon. I'm here today to request an amendment to our next ambulance purchase. This past April, I presented a plan to move the department towards a remount program where new chassis are purchased and our boxes, our patient compartments are rebuilt on those new chassis. This will produce a cost savings of approximately 25 to 35% on ordering a new ambulance from this point forward. At the time of this request, the fire department had submitted a 2020 sub-CIP request to retrofit all of our ambulances with what's known as a power cot loading system. This is an automatic loading system that requires the cot and that secures the cot and patient safely in the rear of the ambulance, as well as prevents back injuries for our employees. The department's 2020 sub-CIP request for the funds to retrofit all existing ambulances were approved. However, since the approval of these funds were after we ordered our first remount ambulance, which should be in about 3 weeks, this first remount ambulance was not ordered with that power cot load system. We didn't know if we would get the funding to do the rest of the fleet, which we did. It was granted. Today, I'm asking permission to approve the addition of this cot loading system to this new remount. It's still time to be installed before we receive it, to bring our entire fleet of ambulances by 2020 to all have this system. This will be a change or a change of an amount from $174,300 to $202,000, and it still is within the budget that we had for this ambulance. Be glad to answer any questions.
Questions? Excuse me.
Now, is this going to be in all your ambulances then?
It will.
From now on?
The sub-CIP funds will purchase the kits. Our emergency vehicle technician will install them here on all the ambulances, and every single ambulance will have this feature.
It's a good idea. Patients have become a little heavier over the years.
Yeah.
And I know you guys work out a lot, but it is a source. It's a major opportunity for back injuries, from the firefighters. All right, thank you. Any questions, comments from the public? Bring it back to the commission.
Let's see, sorry, I lost my place here. Mayor Davis, I move that we authorize the addition of the power load cot system in the amount of $27,660 for the 2019 ambulance remount.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to authorize the addition of the power load cot system in the amount of $27,660 for the 2019 ambulance remount. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item 7.3.
Item 7.3, consider change order number 2 for the 2019 Mill and Inlay project, city project number 90014.
Mr. Stack.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. This is a second change order for our Mill and Inlay project. The first one we approved for the soccer complex, and that has been completed and went pretty well. really really helped that parking lot a lot and should last for quite a while. We have another change order here that we were requesting for Santa Fe, which was originally part of our project. It needs to be resurfaced, as you all know. It's starting to really needs some work on it, but we did not want to impact Santa Fe. As we've impacted it a lot this year, and then we impacted Ninth Street, and so we felt like we needed to hold off on Santa Fe and get Ninth Street done. So now Ninth Street is done, and feel like that's been a success. And then downtown streetscape is pretty well done. So we feel like this is a time to try to get this in if we can. And so we did have some CIP sales tax dollars that we were not able to get spent, or not as quickly as we'd hoped, or get obligated for this year, and we felt like this was probably the best way to do that. Prices were reasonable. We do feel like we normally see some kind of increase. It's, of course, based on oil, so we could gamble, and maybe we'd get a better cost next year, but it's just hard to tell, and we feel like the contractor could get this done a little earlier this way. It uses up the remaining funds at a pretty good rate from last year, and they've done a good job so far, so this gets us on the docket for getting it done earlier in the spring. So that was our reasoning, I guess, to try to add this change order for the mill and inlay project on Santa Fe from Crawford to Mulberry Streets. So I will stand for questions.
Yeah, I like this project. I do have a question, though, because it seems like the dollars are both coming out of concrete rehabilitation.
Yes, yes.
And do we not have areas that need it, or are we just having troubles finding individuals or to do that rehabilitation on concrete, or why is it the?
Good question. Yeah, we just did not get a good project put out with that this year, and this kind of gets a decent amount of money spent on a really necessary project, and we have a lot of concrete projects scheduled for next year, so that was kind of our thinking, is we'll get to those, but we could not get those bid and finalized this year, basically, so we're a little bit behind on those. That's the bottom line. We have plenty of concrete streets to do, lots of work to do, and manholes as well. I mean, just kind of ongoing maintenance. Luckily, concrete is something that you wait a year or two, that's about the same. It doesn't decay near as quickly as an asphalt road that's going down. So that's the point, or that's why we decided to try to get this asphalt work done, and then next year you'll see probably more concrete work.
Could you review the new lane striping?
Yes.
I'm not sure which lane will functionally disappear.
Yeah, it's similar to kind of this, if you remember, it's probably been about 5 years ago, I believe, south of Crawford. Used to be a 4-lane road with some parking on each side. So that's similar to what this section is. It'll go from a 4-lane road with parking on each side to a 3-lane road with parking on each side, as well as a couple of bike lanes. So the bike lanes, they're about 5 foot wide, so they inevitably kind of the lanes move towards the middle lane, turn lane, a couple of lanes on each side, and then the bike lanes, and then parking. So if you look south of Crawford, it's going to look exactly like that. And our bike lanes, will complete our bike lane kind of along Santa Fe. We're all the way from Wesleyan to the north, all the way to Crawford, and then we've got this gap between Crawford and South Street. South Street is marked, and then 5th Street and 7th Streets are marked, and now Elm is marked. So we get around downtown. That was kind of the idea. Is it's hard to people aren't as excited about biking where there's dangle parking downtown, and so we get people to the outside, which 7th and 5th Street is where the bike lanes are now, and so this would complete that section. But it's a 3-lane section with bike lanes and parking. So I guess the best picture of it is just south of Crawford.
So there'd be parking on both sides of the street.
Correct.
In the block that the hospital sits in now.
That's an option. There's room for it there. So that was something that we've considered. Right now, it's currently parked, or it's marked no parking, I believe. So we'd have to see if that could work. Let me get my plan here. So from Crawford to at least Prescott is.
Guess you can park in that block.
Yep, that's right. That's the normal parking block. So after that, we could allow parallel parking in there, in that area, if that would be beneficial. So it's something we have the room for it at this point. And then we'd have parking all the way to South Street. There is some parking, of course, on the west side there where it's the pull-off by the hospital, that they're kind of in indention areas, and so that'll just be a little bit wider, really. But yeah, depending on driveways and just, whether or not we need parking there, it could be an option in that block.
Would be not in front of the, particularly the hospital and the parking garage, because for the amount of turn traffic that is in there.
That's what I was gonna say, coming out of that driveway it's doable now because of the 2 lanes, cars get by faster. With 1 lane, getting out of that any of the parking lots will be very difficult.
Okay. Yeah, there's quite a few driveways in there, so it would be harder to allow parking unless there's a really long
Well, and the other problem
area.
with the parking that we find on Fifth Street is the parked cars block the view of the traffic coming down Fifth Street. So it's hard enough getting out on the back of the parking lot.
Right.
And if we duplicate that on Santa Fe, I want to give the chief and his firemen any more business.
Okay.
Be a short trip, but still.
Yeah, is there any area there, maybe to the south, that would be okay for parking, or you think not?
I would personally just leave it the way it is, as far as parking.
Okay.
That's.
We try not to take it
just me,
away.
but-
Well, has anybody talked with Salina Regional about their perspective? I mean, I think that would be a valuable perspective to have, is speaking with Joel Phelps or whoever is the present,
The new Jack Hinnenkamp.
the new Jack Hinnenkamp, you read my mind, whoever the
That's all
new
it says,
Jack
name.
Hinnenkamp
Hinnenkamp
is, to ask them about, what challenges that they see as their employees and their patients and their patient families
I would think
park and travel.
For the additional 20 spaces you'd get,
So
I
Dan,
wouldn't
we-
see that being a benefit compared to the,
We currently have a
Increased
design.
traffic.
What does the design call for?
Well, we have parallel parking could be allowed if we remove the signs. So it's just a
But-
question. If we're going to remove, we haven't gotten there yet as far as whether or not we're going to remove the signs and exactly where. So it's more of a working with the property owners, and that would be the way to do that, is to work with the hospital to see. South of there is definitely parking, but we really haven't addressed it in that block.
In light of the fact that there's a parking garage, in light of the traffic concerns, it seems like the presumption is to continue in its current configuration and not add parking. I don't
That's
wanna-
always the default, but it was a good question, so yeah, you're right. There's
So
no
we're-
reason, we're not planning to
does
change
sta-
anything yet.
So does staff have a recommendation?
No, we do not yet. Not in that block. 'Cause I don't-
Beyond the
like,
safety,
there's
I
so
would say
many
the aesthetics, because that's the gateway.
driveways, I
right
don't
into
know,
the
we'll have to see.
South part of the
downtown.
downtown, so I would keep the view and the ingress and egress open.
good point.
We have the block north of South Street as well to look at, but that's, trying to remember if there's parking in that block currently. So I guess, yeah, our plan was to, it's narrowed up for bike lanes, but we had not addressed the parking as much. I mean, typically, we've tried to add it where we can, but that you always have to look at the site distances and the adjacent property owners. If they're expecting parking there, we leave it, but if we're adding parking, then we have to go through kind of what we're talking about now, and we haven't gotten there yet. We really just are dealing with the road that needs overlaid, and then definitely the bike lanes, but whether or not we remove parking signs to allow parking, we're gonna have to work further on that. I've heard that today, for sure.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but we have not heard of any concern about a deficit of parking in the area?
I have not. No, that's odd, I guess, because we're close to downtown. Most of the downtown, you want to add parking wherever you can, but I have not heard of any here. You're right.
So it seems like the consensus is leave it the way it is?
Yes, that's what I'm hearing.
For me, very much so, yes.
If that's acceptable to you, that'd be my recommendation, rather than turning this into a public input process.
Although I would encourage staff, whenever we have something that's going to impact the environs of Salina Regional Health Center and how traffic or anything functions in that neighborhood, I think it would be nice to at least touch base and give them a heads up and allow
I
them to
agree.
have some input as well.
If we were changing the condition,
Right.
I would
Right.
definitely think that should be done.
Right.
So so that recommendation should be made as,
I don't know that it needs to be part of the action.
No,
Yeah.
we're not asking to change anything today, but it's, the 3-lane section is part of the bike master plans. That was really what we were planning to deal with. The question of parking that's a good question that you brought up, that there could be room for it, but there's, at this point, no reason to change it.
just that it says this area will be striped, which,
For bike lanes, yes. 3 lanes for bike lanes, yes, for sure.
okay, so that paragraph does not include adding parking then, okay,
No.
okay. Thank you. All right. Any other comments, questions? Any comments or questions from the public? Hearing none, move back to the commission.
Mayor Davis, I move we authorize the city manager to approve change order number 2 in the amount of $252,593.24 with a $5,434.96 construction contingency of 2.2%.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the change order number 2 for the 2019 mill and inlay project, city project number 90014. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. 7.4.
Item 7.4, discuss single-use plastic bag use in the city of Salina, Kansas.
Who has the honor?
Mayor and Commissioners, it's been a little over a year since this topic was first brought up, and it was just the use of single-use plastic bags in the city of Salina. In the past year, we've met several times. We've provided a lot of information, did some study sessions, talked about the banning of plastic bags. We've talked about charging for single-use plastic bags. We've talked about where it's legal to do it, which states have done it. Where states have made it illegal for cities to ban plastic bags, because there's two sides of the fence there. It's about half and half as far as states that promote it and states that don't allow it. But we've given you a lot of information about the use of plastic bags. There is no city in Salina or in Kansas currently that bans plastic bags or charges for single-use plastic bags. The community that has done more research or has had quite a bit of public outreach and stuff, City of Lawrence, and they were moving forward with the charging for single-use plastic bags. And they have since announcing that, have kind of backed up on it, and they're making sure that that is legal, that there is some concern that depending on what you do with the money that's collected, it may be unlawful taxation. So there's some legal ramifications with that. Most of the states that collect it leave the money with the retailer, which makes the accounting a whole lot simpler. But I'm just kind of teeing it up for you guys. You wanted to make a public discussion of the use of plastic bags in Salina. So if you have any, the packet has a lot of information. We'll try to answer any of your questions or facilitate your conversation as much as we can. But
Lawrence was looking at charging. Did they move completely away from banning plastic bags?
they were looking at charging, and that was the direction they were headed. And then since announcing they were going forward with that, they've kind of repealed it, and it's back in committee. So I have not heard the latest on where the city of Lawrence is.
And if I could, I'd add one thing. Staff did, in the recommendation, staff did recommend and try to provide for you kind of a logical progression of questions that you might take up to divide this question. It's all, as we know from a year's worth of conversation now, it's awful easy to get to move from our interest in addressing the topic to how we might address it to impacts. I think we've tried to provide you 4 talking points that might help you frame your conversation.
I guess it wouldn't hurt just to read those questions in case you don't have a copy of the blue sheet. The first one is, does the City Commission wish to pursue regulation of the use of plastic bags at this time? Second, if the City Commission wishes to proceed, does it intend to provide a formal process for public participation and engagement beyond typical public comment allowed on an agenda item? If the City Commission wishes to provide for a formal public engagement process, does it wish to proceed as previously described in the April 22nd study session or with an alternate approach? And number 4, if the City Commission wishes to proceed, is there additional preliminary information that the City Commission would like to request of city staff before proceeding further? And I don't know if I guess question number 1 could go first. I would almost have put it in second place. Might want more information before I decide it, but if people have already come to their initial opinion on desire
I
to
can offer
explore.
my opinion.
Mhm.
Do you want our opinions before you take public comment on that level?
Well, I thought about that. That's what I was thinking about just 2 or 3 minutes ago. And my brain, 5149 said, would have us speak first. So, but I could go either way if there's strong sentiment.
I would really like to hear from members of the public that are here to speak on this issue first. I mean, I
You
would
do as
agree
well.
with Commissioner Ryan.
5149, that doesn't matter to me. I just didn't want anybody to feel like their voice had been excluded before we made took any decision point at.
Like that. Any objections to doing that? All right. Is there anyone here with an opinion on this issue who'd like to come up? Please come on up to the podium. I was really kind of looking for a full parking lot on this one.
Well, I'm here.
You're here. Hey, we have the important people.
No, I'm not any more important than anybody else, thanks. Norman Mann, Salina, Kansas. This is a health issue. It's a hazard. This has been discussed for 20, 25 years. I've been talking about this. It's our legislators that are dragging their feet. Senator Lee from Kensington, I told her at least 25 years ago, why can't we put a deposit on this? Oh, the business community, they won't like the inconvenience. Well, I don't like the inconvenience of the beer cans or the plastic sacks, and it blows onto my property. I get tired of it. I'm sure you guys get tired of sending employees out to the landfill to pull these plastic sacks off the fence, or it blows across the road onto your windshield and you're going to have a wreck. But you can do something, because you can make this a hazard issue, a health issue. And we can get rid of plastics. There are other materials out there that can be reused. And it would put people together to work if they was to make these recyclable, reusable materials. We don't need to make it out of new virgin material, be it soybeans or oil, any of that stuff. It's been done. I brought mine in here a couple weeks ago, showed you what it was, and it works. It's just, we got to do it. We got to do it. We got to get busy and take care of this planet, because this old planet of mine is, the way we're treating it, we ain't got much time left. As Greta Thunberg said, that activist, international, if any of you watched her on the news, she said, I'm tired of you SHing on my planet. So this isn't just a local issue. It's a population issue that's causing part of this problem. And it isn't just the humans. Population issue, I'm probably maybe stretching it here, taking advantage of it. Not just humans. The government just funded $35 million to take care of the population issue, horses. So, at least start something, guys and lady.
Thanks, Norman.
Well, I did that for Mayor Crawford too, so kick them guys a little bit. Thanks. Do something.
we will,
Get off your thinker and think a little bit.
Deborah Corrales. I have a room dedicated to recycling, but even I think the plastic bags need to go. I gave Joe one that I picked up while I was in California, Oregon, Nevada, or Washington State, don't remember which one. What happened with that? Did you find anything out about those bags?
Oh, yeah, as soon as I get my comments.
Okay.
Joan Ratzliff, Salina. We could do it. I think that what we just need to do is replace those plastic bags with something else. And Aldi's, I think, charges $0.25 to use their bag, or to buy their bag. And you can reuse that bag for quite a number of times, and it holds a lot. But my goodness, there's so many other options. I'm not going to waste my time going over what they might be to use, for reusable bags and what those sources might be, and how they could benefit us by providing advertising to businesses, to our own government, to our economic development organization, whatever it might be. We could have a manufacturing plant if we are growing hemp, for instance, someday down the road. Have a plant in an industrial plant that would manufacture hemp cloth bags and other materials. But by golly, we as a city, we do have the right to legislate for what serves our community best. And if that means that we have some opposition, possibly, so be it. We have the right to regulate our own communities for our own benefit, for our own interest, for the health of our people, our environment, and so forth. There's no debate on the fact that plastic bags get loose. They're just designed that way. They're kind of like balloons that go everywhere, and that they are a hazard in all kinds of ways. They cost people money. They're a hazard to livestock, machinery, and crops, and so forth. So several years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago, I talked to the headquarters at Dillon's, and I just asked them out of curiosity, how would you handle this? Because it's important how your businesses might, how it might impact our businesses. And they said, it wouldn't be any problem. We just do whatever the local regulations require. So I don't see it as being a problem with stores. We can find a way to do it. And I think that's where we need to be putting our efforts, is to find how we do it, not why we shouldn't do it, or what the possible problems might be. We just need to move forward. It's step number one, or pick something else. But we need to change the way that we're consuming and that we're handling our waste. And I think this is a good place to start.
thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm Ken Ritz from Salina, have Images Recycling. I can't remember when we didn't take plastic bags to recycle. Never enjoyed it because they're really an unnecessary item. But there are many unnecessary activities and items, and we don't outlaw them just because they're unnecessary. The flip side of freedom is the right to do wrong, up to a point. It isn't simply to do the right thing. But in any event, bags do recycle. They're very time-consuming. Trex, which is the leading producer of plastic lumber, it has a lot of things in it besides plastic, of course, sawdust and what have you, is expanding their operation. We've shipped to Trex. It has to go to the East Coast. We spent several years, a little bit of time every day, baling plastic bags and stretch film. And stretch film is a much more two-sided issue. Stretch film is something that's difficult to replace. Single-use disposable bags are no sweat. You can replace them with things that are nicer, easier to use, and more economical, so why not? And I think the answer to the why not, to jump around, which is what I guess I'm best at doing, is that it sped up the checkout and reduced the need for baggers at Walmart, Dillon's, other stores that run large volumes of material through their check lines. And I don't know what Dillon's is planning to do to maintain the economies that they gain by using single-use bags. They must have something in mind, because they've announced that within a few years they'll be not using single-use bags at all. So we wouldn't have to outlaw them for them. But in any event, with a little ingenuity and with public participation, if the big box, small package stores would explain to people and make it easier for people to do their own bagging. There are many advantages to doing your own bagging. When you think about it, that when you get home, it's where you wanted it instead of where someone just put it. If we would go back, and I've mentioned this many times, it was only a nickel that Dillon's gave you if you brought your own bag. But it was a pat on the back as well, saying, good job, which human beings that care appreciate being acknowledged. And if we're going to tax single-use bags, and taxing is a much more straightforward approach than outlawing, and simply designate that those funds go to support, provide reusables. That seems to be a logical approach. And then work to see how we can organize things so that reusables are also easier to use, both for the checker and for the individual, if they're going to participate in the bagging operation. And going down the road, that would seem to me to be a positive approach, and then hopefully not get into how do you define a single-use plastic bag. Is what you'd get at Penny's or whatever to put clothing in, is that single-use? They could be reused many times, but I think generally speaking they're not. Gauging by our experience at our recycling center, we had lots of bags that had lots of life left in them. We had bags full of bags that we baled. And so we need to really look at going back to a culture when many decades ago when I was in Britain, people had their bags and they brought them in, and a lot of times things like bread weren't even wrapped because it was that fresh that if you wrapped it, it would steam out and ruin the bread. So people took it just wrapped in a thin sheet of paper and put it in their shopping bag and went on about their business. So anyway, we can retool. We did it when we went to plastic bags. There was tremendous resistance when plastic bags were introduced. And if you remember how it was phrased, is plastic okay? And they had some good psychologists on their staff, I guess, well, it started with paper or plastic. And now you have to request a paper bag, which, by the way, has substantial impact on the environment as well. And as has been pointed out by Joe and others, we should be concerned about plastic bags of all types, but plastic bags are a tiny part of the plastic that we go through, and plastic looks to be a really serious issue in terms of its resistance to breaking down and then except into fine plastic particles that are then ingested and go into the food stream of animals. And so it's really a very serious matter. But anyway, if we're going to do something, I think we should do it positively, and that would include trying to help people on both sides of the cash register to take advantage of the real advantages that reusables have, and to get with the program of how to take advantage of those advantages. So anyway, that's our perspective, and I would dearly love never to have to take, we're not taking him now because we're not taking drop-off, but we spend an inordinate amount of time, and for 20,000 pounds of plastic bags and stretch film, we got $600 spread over 3 years. So no, you would never get an argument from me that getting rid of that item isn't from my personal standpoint. So it's just I think that what should be the American approach is to try to allow people as much room as you can to let them live their life their way, and they'll do the same for you, hopefully. So anyway, anyone that has any thoughts or questions, I'd be more than happy anytime. I'm always good to discuss any of these issues and go into any kind of detail you'd like. So
thank you very much.
Commissioners, if I could, I'd like to offer one clarification. Mr. Ritz mentioned the possibility of taxing bags. I think staff has expressed the concern at the outset. We remain concerned that we don't know that we're not prepared to tell you that that's a legal possibility at the moment. And as Mr. Kowach indicated, while Lawrence initially proposed that, they're starting to reach the same conclusion. So as you make your decision, just don't want you to have that based on the possibility of a tax until we know more.
Just for a simple clarification, if there's a charge for a bag and that money is expressly destined to be used to clean up plastic bags, is that still considered taxing the bag?
My first reaction is yes. Without further either legal opinion or litigation, it's hard to say.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Well, who'd like to go first? Okay, Commissioner Hay. Okay.
Well, I think everybody up on the dais here knows exactly where my point is or what I believe in. You know, we're a town of 47,000 people. And you got towns out there like Los Angeles, New York. They banned the plastic bags. And I guess what really gets me is we know the impact of what these plastic bags have been doing to us, especially, like you said, if you go out to the landfill. I can guarantee you what, with that wind we've had today, that fence is completely covered full of plastic bags out there, and they're floating all over the city. I was given a plastic bag, well, a reusable bag. Ms. Corrales gave this to me. I got on the Walmart corporate website to see if I could get any information that they had on there. And they are planning on, at some time, they don't give a date, a significant date on when this bag here has really 5 good points to it, as I can see. Number one, it's hand washable if you want to clean it up after you use it. It's recyclable. It's sustainable. You can use this bag. They say you can use this bag 125 times. I like to see what that bag would look like after that. And number one, it's made in the USA. I don't like the idea of charging for the use of plastic bags. I just think that what we need to do, and I commend Dillon's, and I commend, like I said, Walmart and them. Aldi's, I think, just came out with a big article where they're looking into trying to do something there. You know, there's not another place in the state of Kansas that's done this. And I still say it over and over and over, Salina could be number one. You know, and I also say it's baby steps. I mean, you know, there's all kinds of stuff out there. You know, there's plastic cups, there's plastic bottles, there's plastic straws. I mean, containers out there. You know, you can't tackle them all at one time, but you got to start somewhere. And if we're going to keep the environment as clean as possible for our children and grandchildren and their grandchildren, then we you know, I think we need to step forward and at least do at least a little part in it. I would really like to see us, I know I've only got about 3 meetings left here, but I would really like to see us do something and move forward on trying to ban plastic sacks or reusable plastic grocery sacks.
Commissioner Ryan.
Well, plastics are a problem. I won't doubt that, and it's probably the right thing to do. But we've got a staff that's saddled with groundwater contamination and downtown ordinances, housing. Lawrence, Douglas County is maybe the highest tax county in the state of Kansas. They've got a resiliency team of a director and 2 employees. I would prefer to see somebody else take this up. I'm not interested in first. There might be a right time to do this at a later time, but I think it's too large a distraction.
Commissioner Hobbit.
I have a tendency to agree with Commissioner Ryan on this a little bit. The time that would be involved on staff at this point, I think, as I think I said a year ago when we discussed this, if we were flush with money and didn't have any other projects on our agenda, I'd be looking for something to do and would maybe be willing to address this. I also, you know, look at the enforcement of it and so on. So forth as being a problem. I still go back to, I think our biggest deal is education. We have the cloth bags out there. I think educating the public on using those whenever possible would be my first step. If you look at using paper bags, and I believe Mr. Ritz said that, you know, using paper also has a significant impact on our environment in a different way. So at this point, I'm probably leaning towards not doing anything, and maybe it's something we take up at a later date, but I don't believe right now is the proper time.
Commissioner Hodges.
You know, I thought I really had my mind made up, and that I certainly understand where Commissioner Ryan and Commissioner Hoppick, the arguments that they advance about the amount of staff time and other concerns that they have, and I fully appreciate that. But when it comes down, well, I just want to say that I think people can evolve in their thinking, and the more you learn, I think the better decisions that you can make. And the more reading that I've been doing about it, it seems like the most successful plastic bag reduction plans use some sort of a combination of things, whether that looks like banning a particular ply of bag or charging for both plastic and paper. But it also has a huge public education component and a public buy-in, and it's something that is going to be really complex, and there will be things that don't get done if we were to move forward at this with this plastic bag discussion. However, when I look into the eyes of my 2-month-old granddaughter, and I think about the work that Greta Thunberg has done. I think, yeah, I'm willing to go ahead and pursue the plastic bag ban, and with the understanding that, one, it's going to have to be a very inclusive approach, and two, we're going to have to, the good thing is that we have research now on what works in different communities and different states and what doesn't, and I think we just all need to be open to whether that looks like a fee per bag or, banning a particular type of bag, whatever we can do to make the most impact. And then three, I think it's incumbent upon us to find other ways that we can maybe even make a bigger impact. And if that looks like revisiting what we're doing with our recyclables, I'd be more than open to doing that, because I think that this is one part, and probably a pretty small part, of a very big problem. So at this point, I'm willing to proceed.
Okay. I have notes. If you think we come in here with our minds made up all the time, we really don't. I have notes all over the sheet of paper, so it's going to sound like I'm jumping around the sheet of paper, because I am. I prefer to use the term plastic use policy. The word ban kind of scares people, because there are some uses for plastic bags which will continue. But well, I know at least 4 of us grew up when there were no plastic bags. You don't have to declare yourself.
I did too.
But, and when plastic bags first started, they did ask, basically, do you mind if we put this in plastic? And I remember we would put the paper bag inside the plastic bag because we didn't trust the plastic bag. When you go into Sam's Club, you don't get an option of paper or plastic. You better have some way you're going to get that stuff home yourself. And Sam's looks like it's doing pretty good business on Saturdays, well, every day of the week. So there are ways to get things home. We don't have to have a plastic bag to put a can of dog food in it to get it from the store to the car into the house. I mean, just carry the can, show your receipt, and keep walking. So there's a lot of behavioral changes that can occur. We can offer education. We can make cloth bags or whatever the bags would be made of available at very low prices. Eventually, people's behavior will change, and you can then move to, well, gosh, the best way to reduce plastic litter is don't buy it. So you can go to the store and you look on the bottom of that package and see what number's inside that little triangle, and if it's a number that doesn't recycle, buy a different product. Eventually, manufacturers will change to suit their consumers. But this is something that would probably have to be done in baby steps. And I don't mind Salina being first. Staff will have a lot of work to do, but this is not something that's going to occur overnight, because you'd have to give businesses time to retool. You have to give us time to start the education process. So even if we, I use it in quotes, ban plastic bags right now, nothing's probably materially going to happen until 2000, I would guess 21 at the earliest. So there's plenty of time to change behavior. In Washington, D.C., they charge 5 cents for each plastic bag. They also charge $3,000 for a 2-bedroom apartment. That 5 cents really doesn't impact anybody. They can afford to pay the 5 cents for the bag. And I tried to find out where the money goes and couldn't find out. I think if there's going to be a charge, that money needs to be earmarked towards something related to the goal that we're trying to achieve. I don't mind us being first. We were first for indoor tobacco. I mean, even if we're not successful, if Topeka were to offer resistance, at the very least, we will have changed people's thinking, or hopefully changed their thinking, or cause them to look at the big problem. I mean, if there's a big continent of plastic in the Pacific Ocean. All of us really ought to be ashamed of that. We're lucky we get to see planet Earth from down here, and we think it goes on forever. I can just imagine how folks who've been astronauts, who've had that wonderful experience of going up and realizing, this is all you got. So better take care of it. And Mr. Matt, I agree. It truly is a health issue. And until we realize that, trash is probably one of our biggest health issues, we're just digging a big hole for ourselves. I don't know if any of us would have the exact wording for an ordinance right today, but I certainly would like to further the discussion and get us moving towards something. Like I said, some plastic bags will probably still be needed. I don't know what hospitals used to put their waste in 50 years ago. I honestly don't know. But, and weighted plastic doesn't blow around as much as these thin little grocery bags. I always said, even plastic bags for pet waste, you could find something else, but at least that bag won't blow as easily. Unless you're like me, you have a poo, in which case the weight doesn't help the bag any. But, it's just, there's nothing there, But I think it's time for us to explore, and we don't have to overburden staff. This is not, in the hierarchy of our big projects, we would certainly give you time to
Dr. Davis,
work on
if
this.
I may, when I brought up the thing, I got 3 meetings left, like to see them. I don't mean that I would like to see something passed, within the next 3 meetings. I would like to see the ordinance, how it was written, of having a timeline on it saying by 2021, by January 1st of 2021, then we're going to put this into effect. Because a lot of these places, are not going to be able to just do away with all of their plastic bags within a couple of months and have to change over. So that's why I would like to see it, however it is put in, to give them progressively go in to that time. Not jump in it all the way.
Can cities own hemp farms? That new source of revenue we always look for, that might be an option there.
It takes an investment to own something as a
Right.
starting point, but I honestly don't know.
But that's my not-so-short piece on this.
I would like to see there be some process for public participation in it, to hear both from the residents and the commercial side of the issue as we move it forward.
Well, and I think
Definitely agree.
Consensus.
And I think we would have to, I'm not sure who used the term inclusive approach, but
I think I did.
you did, yeah. But there'd be no other way to have a successful attempt, whether it was ultimately successful or not, just to have the successful conversation.
I don't know exactly what the staff would be doing, but I'd be willing to volunteer in helping in any way that I could.
We got volunteer number 1. Thank you. See, we know who you are now, so.
I have a bedroom dedicated to dogs, cats, and recycling, so.
All righty. Does staff have any more input?
Just that, now that it looks like you've reached consensus, a motion to direct staff would be appropriate.
I'd like to make a motion that we direct staff to proceed with whatever we need to do with the discussion of the single-use plastic bag banning.
Could I add one thing?
Sure can.
If it's okay with you, proceed with the regulation of plastic bags, providing a formal process for the public participation, similar to what was presented by Lauren last April.
Thank you. That's close to the number 3
I was
on
trying to
there,
go
so-
down, I was trying to go
I
down
was
the
hoping you gave
points
us
to
more
see if we
specific.
could incorporate it in one motion, if that's okay with you, and if it's not, I totally get
Yeah,
that.
no, that's fine with me. I just don't want to see a long, drawn-out process on it either, so.
Well, I'll second that.
Okay. So we have a motion, a second, and an amendment, which was approved by the first. With the, any more discussion? Is the clerk in a position to read that back?
I have to direct staff to proceed with a plastic bag ban with a formal public engagement process.
Did you want to add similar to the?
Since it was one of those questions similar to the process referenced by staff earlier,
In the,
At April 22nd, on the April
Yes.
22nd study session.
yes.
okay, everyone's comfortable with the motion as it reads? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
The motion carries 4-1. Thank you. Before we get to other business, I'm feeling the wrath of what I'm going to catch when I go home. That lovely lady in the green jacket was my wife, Pamela, and she had a lot of fun at the party. Thank you for indulging me. Now, we can go to other business.
I have a question, because I have an item that I don't know if it's better suited to addressing other business, or if it's better suited when we go have the request for the motion for executive session regarding the Expo Center lease. And so I would turn to legal counsel and ask if I would like, what I'd like to discuss is the email that we received earlier in the week that was marked urgent Expo Center update that we received on Tuesday morning. Do we discuss that under business, or do we wait and discuss that prior to the executive session since it's on our agenda?
Would this be a suitable time for us to take a 5-minute recess? Okay, thank you. Recess for 5 minutes.
Trent, he's a gesture.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. All righty, we will call the meeting back into session. And I believe we were waiting for an opinion from our city attorney.
Right. Well, Commissioner Hodges' question, I think, probably relates to what I anticipated was a discussion we would need to have at the outset if you were to go into an executive session. And I'll try not to preempt where you want to go with this, Commissioner Hodges, in terms of the discussion.
Don't worry, yeah.
But
I'll go where I need to go. Thanks.
Yeah, we have a mix of, I mean, this issue has been now discussed to a certain extent publicly. It's my understanding that there is new information that potentially warrants consultation with me and development of, and discussion of, and development of positions relative to negotiations with the county that would, I think, qualify for executive session discussions. That's why it's on there. But there are certainly matters that we can't just be too all-encompassing, given the nature of public communications that have occurred. So that's not terribly definitive, but I don't know if I'm on to the same concern that you were wanting to explore.
Partially, and I also just wanted to talk about process vis-a-vis the direction that the governing body gave last week. So I'm just looking to you to see if it's more germane to discuss that right before the executive, as we take up the action to go into executive session, or that we do it now. And I know that we've got members waiting for the first executive session item, so I'm happy to wait until preceding the second proposed executive session, if that makes sense.
That does.
Thanks. Okay. Let's see. This is the executive session on trade secrets. And how long do you anticipate?
30 minutes.
30 minutes? Okay. I move that the City Commission recess into executive session for 30 minutes to discuss the subject of a specific economic development prospect based upon the need to discuss data relating to financial affairs or trade secrets of corporations, partnerships, trusts, and individual proprietorships pursuant to KSA 75-4319B4. The open meeting will resume in this room at 6:11 p.m.
Second. Been moved and seconded, to recess into executive session for trade secrets as described. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We're in executive session.
Debbie.
Okay, I'm going to call the meeting back into regular session. There'll be no action taken as a result of this last executive session. Commissioner Hodges, you
Yes.
wish to speak before we
Yes, if
move
possible.
in? Please.
I wanted to speak to an email that we received on Tuesday morning that was entitled Urgent Expo Center Update. And I went back and looked at video of the meeting from the preceding Monday, December 2nd, when we had a whole crowd of Expo Center advocates that were here to speak on behalf of the Expo Center. And at that time, and it's reflected in the minutes that we approved as well, the consensus was that the ball was in the county's court, and we needed to wait for a reply from the county. So I was a little bit surprised to see that we had proceeded with negotiations, and I understand that it was probably with the best of intention, but we had, as a governing body, had not authorized the mayor, and I don't know, maybe the county commission had authorized Chairman Vidrickson to proceed with negotiations on our behalf. So I guess, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. So I guess my question is, how exactly did that unfold? And in the interest of having a full public discussion, which was referenced actually in that county commission meeting that I think Joe was there, I was there on December 3rd, I didn't have any idea this was going on. I can't speak for the other members of the governing body, but I didn't have any idea that this was going on.
It's actually quite simple. Remember at the end of that meeting, I said that I had Commissioner Vidrickson's phone number, and he had mine. And he and I met to bounce ideas off each other, much like if you were to meet with Commissioner Sparks, you wouldn't be negotiating on our behalf. And we each knew that any discussions we had were personal opinions, and that, as the saying goes here, nothing happens unless two other people agree with you. So all we were doing were bouncing off ideas that would keep the conversation going, which we would then individually, independently, go back to our respective bodies, knowing that, it may be a failed effort, but, if there was a chance that we could get this thing moving, we figured this might be groundwork to avoid what looked like was becoming a stalemate in a hurry.
Right.
So at no point was I, nor was he, posturing as if we were representing the will of our respective bodies.
Oh, and I hope you know that I understand that the two of you are working to get to a solution. I get that. But in the email that I received, it talks about proposed approaches and not specifically, but it does go into the proposed approach and proposals and counter proposals, and what I took from that email was a much higher degree of detail of discussion from that. And frankly, you can absolutely talk to whoever you want to, but I know that I've gotten in trouble in the past for acting outside the governing body, like when I wrote that report on the Salina Police Department. We were all in the executive session, and after having known that, I know that we have to talk about our own conduct out here, but I'm just trying to understand what the rules are on this playing field, because it seems like certain rules apply when you're negotiating with Chairman Vidrickson, and in other situations, it's not deemed appropriate for me to act outside the scope of the governing body.
Well, neither one of us were acting out on behalf of our respective bodies. This could have just as easily have been the Journal reporter and the deputy manager going over, saying, hey, well, let's go look at this. And what Commissioner Vidrickson suggested to me was, we've been talking about diagrams and architect drawings and papers. Let's just walk around there so we can actually, touch and feel these things we're talking about, to see if there's opportunity for adjustments and where we're currently positioned. Because I think he and I both thought that we were just both sides stuck in the mud at that point, waiting for somebody to flinch. This is a opportunity to get something settled without either side taking the blame for slowing it down or either side getting the credit for moving it on. It's just, let's toss this up and see what happens. People don't like it, we're no worse off than we were.
Gotcha. And frankly, I did have a concern as well about where this falls with Cora and Coma, and I'm assuming that this communication, since it came to all of us, is a public communication?
Yes, it was written with that possibility in mind.
Okay.
It does include a provision that it was written on a Tuesday, so we'd met
Right.
the evening prior. So it did include a statement that we didn't elaborate yesterday, but Greg will need to review our options for future deliberations in the executive session in the light of our most recent deliberations in open session. So we were already aware of kind of that open communication and the possibility of going back into executive session question, and we're prepared to speak to that.
Well, I appreciate it, because one of the things that did come up at the county commission meeting, and I think 3 or 4 people spoke to it, was about the need to have these conversations in public and among the public at large, not just the 5 county commissioners and the 5 city commissioners, but to engage in an open discussion so that people could see where the two sides were, where things were breaking down. They could actually watch the process and participate in the process. And I just can't get past the fact that this just seems really at odds with some of the desires for transparency that I heard at that meeting. And I'm speaking totally for myself here. I mean, I appreciate the effort to advance the conversation, but I have concerns about how it's unfolded. Maybe I'll get back in executive session and
even though we are trying to be transparent, this is also a negotiation of a business deal. And some aspects of negotiation, even though we're 85% of the county, we're all county residents, our ultimate responsibility here is to protect city finances. So there are some things that I think from a negotiating standpoint are best done our usual way for contracts in an executive session with legal counsel. What he and I were discussing, we realize we may be just, 2 crazy folks who say, well, this might be something that would get people interested in discussing it further. Most importantly, we want to get all 10 folks back to the table and working to get a solution.
Gotcha. So so you don't consider your actions in any way acting outside the governing body's specific direction? I'm just asking. I'm not trying to level an accusation or anything. I'm just asking.
I could just as easily have had what I did, conversation with one of the 4 of you.
Mm-hmm.
I would have had to chosen very carefully because my gun's out of bullets at that point, can't talk to anybody else. But it was, I'm thinking, who better to talk to if he's willing than the person we're negotiating with.
On a somewhat related but not exactly the same note, I wasn't able to attend the county commission meeting on Tuesday, but I did find an opportunity to listen to the entire video. So I'm familiar with the comments that you're referencing about a desire for open conversation. And one of the things we've talked about, and I think Greg's going to want to elaborate on it here in a minute, is the basis for you as a governing body being able to go into executive session. And it's similar to what the mayor described. It may be an oversimplification, but if you're a buyer or a seller of a home, you might talk with your realtor or your representative of a range. We're going to start here, but we might be willing to go to this. Fully open conversation it kind of precludes the negotiation aspect, or at least doesn't preserve your deliberations and your thought process. So as we've told you before, nothing is mandatory that you have to discuss in an executive session, but we had a conversation about whether, in light of everything that's transpired, this upcoming conversation would be eligible, and with that, I'll let Greg speak to that.
Well, may I ask, Mayor, do we know what the county's expectation is of the governing body at this point?
No, to my knowledge, Commissioner Richardson did not broach our ideas with his commission, and I have not broached our ideas with my commission. So as far as,
do we know
of course,
whether
they meet tomorrow, but
do we know whether he intends to, or
at some point, I would assume it would be however they discuss contracts, which I'm guessing would be in the executive session, but I did not ask him specifically how or when.
Mm-hmm. Well, as you know, there has been extensive public conversation about this topic. The communications between you and Chairman Vidrickson are certainly not privileged in any way. They're not, I mean, there's not a basis for confidentiality as to those conversations. I would think the only basis for a consultation on a privileged basis would be the extent to which your fellow commissioners might wish to address the new information and a position in response to and in light of the new information. But that's a rather narrow conversation in the whole big picture. So that was going to be my preamble if you chose to go into executive session, was to just acknowledge that this is a difficult one to parse, to now kind of bring it back into a privileged conversation. I think there is some room there, but it's going to be a little tedious for you all, I think.
Now, I mean, I'm perfectly prepared to discuss it in open session, and I don't know, I mean, we've done a fair amount of this in open session already. I mean, so both sides have sort of taken the cloak off of internal negotiations in this process, so it's not the way we usually negotiate when there's clearly two sides. But in fact, if the two commissions were to meet jointly, we would be doing the same process anyway.
I guess again, I'm not surprised that Mayor Davis talked to Commissioner Vidrickson, the fact that you told us you had each other's phone numbers and we knew that. I guess my question to legal counsel would be, are you saying it would be appropriate for Mayor Davis to tell us a little bit in the public out here about how their conversations went? But again, I don't want to get into talking about negotiations, obviously, unless we're in executive session and given ideas of where we want to, where we would lead if we were to move forward. So from what you said, I'm a little confused as to what we want to take.
The discussion, to be just as frank and
that's what I need.
Blunt and faster than usual. You all have had and have not hesitated to articulate your individual positions on this matter in great detail. And now, when the question was raised as to whether you could have an executive session, I thought, yes, you could. Entirely new information to a certain extent. Frankly, not so much as to the conversation between the mayor and Chairman Vidrickson, but more to your response to that and how it affected your collective position on the matter. But as I say, that's a rather stilted conversation, I realize. But you can talk about anything you want, obviously, about this matter publicly. If there is something that you all feel like strategically requires a private conversation, you're still negotiating. So I think there is a basis for that, but it is quite limited.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, I would, in open session, discuss my suggestions, and then if there was questions or opinion about modifying those, we would then go into executive session.
That would be probably
because I have some
first step.
and again, I didn't attend the meeting, but I did watch it live, and I have some personal ideas that I would like to share with the commission, but again, I think it's a contract, you know, it would fall under that, so I don't want to sit out here and discuss a couple of my ideas or opinions based on the fact that we still have contract negotiations.
And that's why I say, I think if the conversation can be limited to the elements of the latest discussion and not rehashing anything that has gone back and forth previously and publicly, then I think there is still room for an appropriately strategic negotiation discussion, as long as we're not, as long as we're dealing with the new information and not trying to close the, put the air back in the balloon or whatever the term would be as to the prior discussions.
On the assumption that you'll be in the executive session with us, will you be
Right.
able to raise your hand and say Oklahoma if we're going too far?
Oh, I view that as my job, yes.
Okay.
But as it relates to that, we've had a lot of conversations with a little bit of information, whatever might be the most recent at the time. I have gathered kind of the chronology of everything that led up to that. And in light of Greg's comments, that's information that probably ought to be shared in open session. If that's of interest to you, I'd be happy to do that. It's everything from, our initial proposal and design and the counties and the correspondence back and forth. I wouldn't go over it in, great detail, but it could serve, I've created a notebook for each of you, and it could serve as a refresher of everything that's led up to this point.
See, I don't agree with deflated balloon theory because it really isn't. I mean, it isn't over with. The discussion was never ended because the last thing that the county at the meeting the other day, the last thing they said they were going to table sending the letter out and was hoping for further negotiations.
Yeah, well, Greg, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I think what Greg is saying is everything that's been discussed in open session probably needs to be discussed in open session. The information to be eligible for executive session conversation will be new information related to continuation of that negotiation, alternate approaches, proposals. Have I got that right?
Yes. Commissioner, as soon as you all start articulating your own position and breaking rank, quite frankly, with open public discussion of individuals' own positions, it's hard to sustain a true negotiation model. And that's the dilemma I think we have, frankly, possibly on both sides. It's hard with 5 members of governing bodies on each side of a negotiation to sustain that negotiation model. I understand that. And I'm not saying, as I say, there are subjects that have been publicly discussed that I can't legitimately take you back in that room and say, well, now it's okay to speak as though it's private when we've discussed it publicly. Now, I would understand what, to the extent I'm aware of what is yet to be discussed, that there is some new information. And that's all I'm saying. If we can stick to the new information, and if there are positions to be derived from that new information, I think that's an appropriate attorney-client privileged executive session. But we're not going to be able to stray from that.
Sounds good.
You got me more confused.
Well, one clarification that might be helpful is the last time you deliberated about this, you came out of executive session and had a very detailed and public deliberation about individually where you stood, options, what you were open to, what you weren't open to, what your concerns were, what you're trying to address. That was really the first time that you had open discussion that now factors into what Greg's analysis.
So just if I'm summarizing this correctly, and I think I followed you very well tonight, Greg, I think I'm getting it. Mayor Davis can let us know the work that he's done. Commissioner Hoppick can let us know
Or
ideas.
ask questions, maybe. I may have
And-
two questions
Yeah.
that we may need to
Right.
discuss out here.
Commissioner Hoppick can impart ideas that he has, but when it gets to the point of having the conversation about whether or not we're okay with that or not okay with that, or have you thought about this, those discussions need to happen out here. It's more just to impart new information that we hadn't seen or considered before.
Well, I would go a little bit further. I think to the extent that the new information prompts
A question.
new discussion
Right.
of the new information,
Right.
that can be handled either way, privately or publicly, as you develop a negotiation, as you hash out a position that you would then ultimately want to communicate publicly. It's just, we have had very public discussions up until, to me, it's just the difference between what you will know when you hear directly from the mayor what those discussions were in full context. I think that's still appropriate material for discussion as to how it, I do think that you all can discuss, whether that's a great idea, or that's just the worst idea I've ever heard, as long as we're on the new information.
Okay. How long do you think
So-
we'll need?
I apologize. If they wish to discuss a new alternate proposal, what is your opinion of that?
As far as discussing it there,
Right.
I think if it's based on the new information, it's appropriate to develop that strategy privately, and then to the extent it is to be communicated, then, that would be communicated in whatever manner is most appropriate.
All right.
And then one last thing, totally at your discretion, if you'd like, I've gathered that kind of historical information and could walk you through that quickly if that's of interest.
I don't.
Been there, done that?
Yeah.
Okay.
But don't shred it, because we may be back out, you may be back out here in a few
We'll
minutes.
certainly hang on to it.
I would think, I was going to say 25 minutes, but if you'd rather go short and add it a second time,
It's what, I don't know.
20 minutes.
Okay.
20? Okay.
Yeah, 20 minutes.
Okay. I move that the City Commission recess into executive session for 20 minutes to discuss the subject of negotiations with Salina County relating to the Expo Center lease agreement with legal counsel based upon the need for consultation with an attorney for the public body, which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship pursuant to KSA 45-7319B2, and for the reason that the public discussion of the matter would adversely affect the interests of the city. The open meeting will resume in this room at 7:56 PM, or 6:56, I'm sorry. 6:56 PM.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to recess into executive session for purposes of discussion of negotiations. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
relating to the Expo Center lease agreement with legal counsel based upon the need for consultation with an attorney for the public body which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship pursuant to KSA 45-7319B2, and for the reason that the public discussion of the matter would adversely affect the interests of the city. The open meeting will resume in this room at 7:13 p.m.
Second.
Moved and seconded to reconvene an executive session for an additional 15 minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, we'll call the meeting back into regular session. We did have very good discussion.
Mayor, if I may.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to express my appreciation to the governing body for recognizing the parameters in which the executive session had to occur and for staying on the topic of the new information.
I guess if you tell us enough times, we eventually get it right. But thanks for the guidance. I guess we would actually need a motion to.
To direct staff.
Yeah, in our discussion, we realized that we need additional discussion with our county colleagues, and it was a general sentiment to request to meet jointly with the county commission on December 19th, which I believe is a Thursday. If there's a motion that could be raised here, we could consider that as a formal action.
Quick question, if they're not available with the majority of their commission, do we want to, because we're getting into the holidays, push that till after the first of the year and direct staff to give us some dates? Because pinpointing one date, I'm afraid, is going to but I mean, I think we could do that, but I would also, in that motion, we don't have a motion on,
We don't
do
have
we?
a motion yet, no.
Well, I'll make one then.
All right, thank you.
Mayor Davis, I move that we direct staff to set up a joint city-county commission meeting on Thursday, December 19th in the evening, and with public input to be taken at that time. And if that date does not work, for city staff to work on an alternate date after the first of the year.
Second.
Could I offer one clarification, I guess? Rather than set up, how about propose?
Propose, yeah.
Just
Propose.
to recognize the
Right.
mutual aspect of
yeah.
that conversation.
Okay.
Thanks.
So noted.
Been moved and seconded to propose a joint city-county commission meeting on December 19th, or whichever day would work best for both groups in the early 2020. Well, it's hard to say. For the purposes of continuing our discussion on the Expo Center lease. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. We now have,
So now, Mayor, how long do you need on this?
I need 5 minutes.
we will tack on 5 minutes ahead of time on
What did I do
whichever amount of time.
There it is.
I guess I would just look down, would 30 minutes be enough for?
Start with that.
Start with 30? All right.
I move that the city commission recess into executive session for 30 minutes, beginning at 7:25 p.m. to discuss the city manager's performance evaluation based upon the need to discuss personnel matters of non-elected personnel pursuant to KSA 75-4319B1. The open meeting will resume in this room at 7:55 p.m.
And that's been moved and seconded. Our HR Director, Natalie Fisher, will be present for at least the beginning of that meeting. She may decide to stay or leave. But she'll be in the room at the very beginning.
Just to confirm, Greg and I, unless do you want us to stay, Greg and I intend to hit the road for Kansas City.
Safe travels.
Yes. All right. It has been moved and seconded. All in favor of recessing into executive session for 30 minutes? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. All righty.
Recess again into executive session for an additional, I'm sorry, you told me twice now, 5 minutes, to discuss the city manager's performance evaluation based upon the need to discuss personnel matters of non-elected personnel pursuant to KSA 75-4319B1. The open meeting will resume in this room at 8:02 p.m.
Second.
Moved and seconded to reconvene in executive session for 5 minutes. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
All, okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. All right, we're back into regular session. As the last executive session discussed personnel matters of non-elected personnel, there would be no public announcement of any action taken. Entertain a motion to adjourn unless there's any
Second.
other business. Moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. See you next week.
Are you leaving your name?